Welcome to Create, Build, Manage, the Entrepreneur's Toolbox.
Welcome to Create, Build, Manage on BizTV. I'm Kelly Phillips. Today we have a great guest for you. Vanessa Lopez is a licensed funeral director in New York City. She's committed to empathetic and compassionate funeral planning and has some suggestions about how we handle the process of death and dying. Stick around. We'll be right back with more Create, Build, Manage on BizTV. She's a licensed funeral director in New York with more than 15 years of dedicated service to the funeral industry. She also specializes in multicultural death customs. Joining us now is Vanessa Lopez. And Vanessa, I know you probably get asked this a lot, but what is most misunderstood about the profession that you have chosen?
First of all, thank you everybody for having me here. It's a pleasure to share this information with everyone. I would say as far as the funeral industry goes, one of the biggest misconceptions and sort of myths would have to be surrounding the process of cremation. I have a lot of families that come to me and they want that reassurance that the person that they are receiving is the person that they know. As we know, cremation is a final process, final method of disposition. So the person that comes to me is a completely different sort of person that is returned to the families. So they always want to make sure, how do I know for a fact that these are the ashes of my loved one? So that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that we have right now in the funeral industry. And I always let my clients know, we work with crematories that are certified crematories in their state, and they have to abide by very strict rules and regulations. One of the common questions that I get from families is, how do I know that my loved one is being cremated by themselves, not with other strangers being cremated at the same time? And that is one of the reassurance that I give to families. Every crematory that works within your state has to follow particular guidelines, and every individual is cremated by themselves, individually, in their own particular retort. There will not be more than one person being cremated at the same time. Cremation is a process that could take up to 3 hours. And once the cremation process is completed, then the crematory attendants have to process those ashes. They have to create a certificate number. They also have to create a cremation certificate. So all of these protocols are put in place so that families can rest assured that the cremation process is a transparent kind of process. And there are different ways in which a family can also be present and do what is known as a cremation with a witnessing, in which the crematory allows the family to go into the back end of the crematory and see their loved one being placed into what is known as a retort. This is another additional sort of layer of confirmation that a family has that only their loved one is being cremated at that particular moment, and that you are not going to be receiving the ashes of a complete and total stranger. So I would say, since cremation is one of our most predominant forms of disposition across the United States, clients, families always want that reassurance. They want to know that it is their loved one that they are receiving back from the funeral home and from the crematory that they are taken to. So I would say currently at this time, that would be one of the biggest sort of misunderstood processes that have to do with the funeral industry. because families they give you their loved one. They put their loved one in your care. And when they come back to the funeral home, you are returning to them ashes. So they want to have that sort of reassurance from the funeral director, from the funeral home, that they are indeed getting the ashes of their loved one back. So I would say that would be one of the common questions that I get from families is, how can you reassure me that I will be receiving my loved one back from the crematory and not a completely different person?
Is this something that you always knew you wanted to get into? You seem to have a lot of passion and understanding what people are going through when they give you their loved one.
Yes. It takes a particular person to be a funeral director. You have to be very empathetic. You have to have a lot of compassion with the families that you are dealing with. Every situation is different circumstances under which the person passed away. So you always have to be very open. Number one, to listening. You always have to have compassion with the families that you are working with. You have to be a very strong-minded individual, because not every family that comes to you has had a loved one that has passed away from natural causes. You have families that have lost a loved one due to suicide or overdose addiction or homicide victim. So these are cases that are incredibly, incredibly difficult for families to navigate. So it takes a very particular person to deal with these kinds of situations. I've been in the funeral industry for over 15 years. And for me, it was definitely a calling. It was a calling to serve the public. It was a calling to help people through the most difficult moments of their lives. So when they come to me, it is an honor to serve my families. It is an honor to serve the community, because as a funeral director, you have to do everything that you can to remove some of that uncertainty, remove some of that stress, remove all of those sort of preconceived notions that they have when they walk into a funeral home. So my years of experience have definitely prepared me for these kinds of situations. And for me, the biggest sort of take back, the gratefulness that I feel over what I do as a career, comes from knowing that I'm able to help families through these very difficult processes.
If you could change the way America handles the process of death and dying, how would you change it?
I would say the number one thing is to promote an open dialogue. Have an open dialogue with your family, with your loved ones, of what you feel are the plans that you want to put in place to cover what would be your own process of dying. This is something that we don't have enough of in our society. We don't have these conversations with our families. We don't have these conversations with our spouses, with our parents. And when the moment comes, then it becomes a situation that is completely filled by all of these emotions that are so overwhelming, so overpowering, that we know very little of. The majority of the families that I work with, they tell me, I've never done this before. We can prepare for these situations beforehand if we have an open dialogue with our friends, with our family. I would say that would be the number one thing that we need to change as an American society. Then I would say the second most important thing would be for funeral directors to see themselves as a point of reference, see themselves full with this knowledge that they can then pass on to these families to help them through these very difficult situations. So number one, I would say, is promote an open dialogue between you and your family, especially if you are going through long-term illness, especially if you don't have the financial means at this point in time to cover an unexpected passing of one of your loved ones. So I would say those are two of the main things that we need to address as an American society. We need to step away from this sort of belief that, oh, if I speak about death, then I'm bringing it upon to myself. This is something that is sort of at the back end of my mind. We need to bring that forward because this is an eventuality that we need to be prepared for as an individual, as a family, because the more you know, the more educated you are, the more knowledge that you have about the process, the easier it's going to be when that moment actually arrives. So definitely fostering this open dialogue is very much needed here in the United States as a whole. I would say, secondly, funeral homes to not just know the information as far as your traditional funeral services, but also organizations that would be available for families that are having financial difficulties and cannot cover the cost of a funeral. How myself as a funeral director, how can I access this network in which I can then provide other means for families to cope with what it is that they're going through? To be able to offer grief support services to families, to be able also to provide them a sort of network that they can rely on, have family and friends around them that can help them, that can provide them with a nurturing environment so that they don't feel like they are going through this process alone. Many people come to me pretty much telling me, I am alone in this process. How can you help me?
Okay,
It
Vanessa,
shouldn't be this way.
Let me stop you right there because I know we need to go to break, but we'll come back and talk more. So stay with us. Vanessa Lopez coming up more next. Continuing the conversation about the taboo subject of death and why it should not be a taboo subject any longer. Vanessa Lopez joins us again. And Vanessa, let's continue the discussion talking about the biggest changes and challenges that you have faced as a funeral director.
Yes, I would say the biggest challenge that I'm facing right now is families' financial difficulties in covering the cost of the funerals for their loved ones. That would definitely be one of the main challenges that I am facing. Also, another challenge that I am facing in the funeral industry is providing services for immigrant families that have recently arrived in the United States. A lot of them do not have that support system either. They are new to our country. They don't know the process. A lot of them come to be under the care of friends and families. And a lot of times when they pass away, their families, those individuals that are kind of receiving them here in the US, do not have the financial means to now cover what would be a repatriation service for these individuals. I have a lot of cases of ethnic groups from Mexico, from Colombia, Guatemala, that are passing away in the United States after arriving here probably within a year times. And once they pass away, we don't have that sort of process in place to be able to help them return home. So I would say these are the two main challenges that I'm facing right now as a funeral director in Brooklyn, New York. Financial difficulties from families and immigrant services for repatriation for recently arrived immigrants here in the US.
And I know one of the services that you provide is you specialize in multicultural death customs. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. The funeral homes that I work with, we do multicultural sort of funeral services for any background. We work with individuals from the Muslim religion. We work with the Jewish community. We work with the Spanish community. We work with the Buddhist and the Hindu community. So any sort of religious preference that the family has, they are able to come to our funeral home and we are able to tailor a funeral service that covers their ethnic needs, their religious needs, their cultural needs, because we are all very different. And so having this information so that you can better serve your families is of great importance. I would say New York City, with such a big and diverse cultural background, has allowed me to be able to gain this experience because I have had families from all cultural backgrounds coming to me for help in planning these types of services.
Is this something that you should talk with your family before you come to the end of life? Talk to them about what you want and some of the customs, perhaps, that your religion or your beliefs have when it comes to burial?
You should. You definitely should, because probably not everybody in your family group adheres to your same religious beliefs. For example, I have clients that are of the Buddhist religion, but nobody else in their family practices their same sort of religion. So they will be completely unaware on what a Buddhist traditional service would look like. So you need to have these conversations with your families. Again, I have had instances in which the individual who has passed away is from the Muslim faith, but nobody else in the family is. So when they come to me, they still want to honor the religious belief of the person that has passed away, but they have no clue as to what it takes to plan that kind of a service. So it's very important that if your religious beliefs, if your backgrounds are different from those of your family, your extended family, your friends, that you sit down and have an open communication with them as to exactly the type of services that you want for yourself. This is very important.
If it's something that's an uncomfortable situation where you don't want to talk about it or don't feel comfortable talking about it to your family and friends, would it be as simple as writing down your wishes and having those go to the people, your family members or friends after your death?
100%. Yes. Put everything down in writing. If this is going to make the process easier for you, then use that process. Detail everything to the last sort of moment of exactly the way that you want your funeral service to be. If you want to opt for a cremation rather than a burial service, write this down. Be specific, because at the end of the day, is to honor your life the way that you would want to be remembered, the way that you would want to be honored. So you need to take charge of that. And if it feels more comfortable writing everything down and then presenting it to that person of your choosing, then do it that way. The more that you let them know, the more that they will be able to honor your final wishes.
In addition, it also takes out the emotion that one has after the passing of a loved one. I've got to ask, what's the most important lesson that you have learned over the course of your career?
I would say preparation. Preparation is the number one lesson that this industry has taught me. The more that you prepare for the eventuality of your own mortality, the more in control you will be of this process. This is a process that can take years if a person is suffering from a long-term illness, or this is a process that can only happen within a matter of an instant if a person passes away of unexpected sort of causes. So we don't know exactly when this moment will be coming. So the more prepared that we are, the more that we educate ourselves, the more that we look for options available to ourselves, the easier this moment will be. If we wait till right there and then a moment that is already so difficult, so stressful for your family to go through becomes even more and more of a challenging situation for your families to deal with if you don't prepare for it. I would say that's the number one lesson that this field has taught me. So that's why as a funeral director, I do everything that I can to educate the public that comes to me, to give them as many tools as I can so that I can prepare them and educate them and give them tools needed so that this process does not have to be so uncertain for them.
Does it all go back to there are two certainties in life, death and taxes? Is that basically what it goes back to? I mean, we're all going to die.
Yes, ma'am. I would definitely say so. As much as we want to put this eventuality in the back of our minds, it is something that every single one of us is going to have to experience at one moment or another. Whether it is the passing of our loved pet, whether it is the passing of our spouse, the passing of our parents, of friends, this is something that at one point or another is going to touch our lives. So the more that we know about it, the better we can handle it.
One last question. What's the most impactful experience that you've encountered during your career?
I would say my trip to Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal. It was an experience that changed my perspective on death and dying. I was able to participate in what would be funeral rituals for a highly ranking Rinpoche in a monastery in Kathmandu, Nepal. His name was Tenga Rinpoche. He was a very, very beloved master in Kathmandu. And sort of his practices had to do with death practices. And opening that world to me by taking the chance and traveling to Nepal and wanting to educate myself more on what it was Buddhist death customs, this was something that really changed my approach as how I treat the industry here in the Western world.
Vanessa, thank you so much for your insight. We really appreciate you spending time with us today. Thanks for joining me today for BizTV's Create, Build, Manage. Episodes of Create, Build, Manage are available on demand on the free BizTV streaming app. Visit watch.biztv.com and get BizTV programming anytime, anywhere. Stay tuned to BizTV for more stories that educate, enlighten, and empower.